The year is 1388. The rugged hills and valleys of eastern Bosnia are a land of fierce independence, caught between the ambitions of rising empires and the stubborn will of local lords. The Kingdom of Bosnia, a mountainous realm of warriors and feudal loyalties, stands at a crossroads. To the east, the Ottoman Empire, a growing juggernaut, is pushing into the Balkans, its armies fueled by discipline and a hunger for conquest. To the west, the powers of Hungary and Serbia watch with unease, their own rivalries simmering. In this volatile world, a small but pivotal clash unfolds near the town of Bileća, a battle that will echo through the history of the region, though its details are often overshadowed by later, larger conflicts. This is the story of the Battle of Bileća, a moment when Bosnian resolve met Ottoman ambition head-on. To understand this battle, we need to step back and see the broader picture. The late 14th century was a time of upheaval in the Balkans. The Ottoman Empire, under Sultan Murad I, was no longer just a regional power in Anatolia. It had crossed into Europe, seizing key territories like Adrianople by 1369 and defeating Serbian forces at the Battle of Maritsa in 1371. These victories sent shockwaves through the Christian kingdoms of the Balkans. The Ottomans were methodical, using a mix of military might, diplomacy, and vassalage to erode resistance. By the 1380s, their raids were probing deeper into Serbia, Bulgaria, and Bosnia, testing the strength of local rulers. Bosnia itself was a kingdom forged in defiance. Ruled by King Tvrtko I, it had risen from a patchwork of noble territories into a regional power. Tvrtko was a shrewd leader, balancing alliances with Hungary and Serbia while asserting Bosnia's independence. His kingdom was a land of fortified towns, dense forests, and narrow valleys, terrain that favored defenders who knew it well. But Bosnia was not united. Feudal lords, or magnates, held significant power, and their loyalty to the crown could waver. This fragmented structure made it vulnerable to external threats, especially from an enemy as organized as the Ottomans. By 1388, Ottoman raids into Bosnia were intensifying. These were not full-scale invasions, but probing attacks, often led by experienced commanders tasked with softening resistance and gathering intelligence. One such raid, led by a general named Timurtash Pasha, targeted the eastern reaches of Bosnia, near the modern-day town of Bileća. Timurtash was a seasoned officer, loyal to Sultan Murad, and his forces were likely a mix of light cavalry, Akinji raiders, and infantry, mobile and deadly. Their goal was to plunder, weaken local defenses, and assert Ottoman dominance, but they were about to encounter resistance they hadn't anticipated. The Bosnian response was led by Vlatko Vuković, a prominent nobleman and one of Tvrtko's most trusted commanders. Vlatko was no stranger to warfare. He hailed from the powerful Kosaka family, which controlled much of eastern Bosnia, including the region around Bileća. Alongside him were other Bosnian nobles, possibly including Radić Sanković, though historical records are sparse on the exact composition of the Bosnian army. What we do know is that the Bosnians assembled a force of local fighters, knights, foot soldiers, and perhaps militia drawn from nearby settlements. Unlike the Ottomans, who relied on disciplined formations, the Bosnians fought with a mix of feudal levies and guerrilla tactics, using the rugged landscape to their advantage. The exact date of the battle is uncertain, but it likely took place in late summer or early autumn of 1388, when the weather allowed for campaigning. The site near Bileća was a hilly region, crisscrossed by streams and dotted with forests. This was not an open plain suited for cavalry charges, but a constricted battlefield where ambushes and defensive stands could turn the tide. Timurtash's forces, confident from their earlier successes, may have underestimated their opponents. The Ottomans were used to facing disorganized resistance in the Balkans, and they likely expected the Bosnians to crumble under the weight of their attack. But Vlatko Vuković had other plans. The Bosnians chose their ground carefully, likely luring the Ottomans into a trap. The details of the battle are frustratingly vague. Medieval chronicles often focus on outcomes rather than tactics, but we can piece together a plausible picture. The Bosnians probably used the terrain to disrupt the Ottoman advance, perhaps positioning archers and infantry in elevated positions to harass the enemy. Vlatko's knights, heavily armored and mounted, would have been held in reserve for a decisive charge. The Ottomans, caught in unfamiliar territory, struggled to maintain cohesion. Their light cavalry, ideal for open raids, was less effective in the confined spaces of the Bosnian hills. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. The Bosnians, fighting for their homeland, had the advantage of morale and local knowledge. The Ottomans, far from their supply lines, faced mounting pressure. At some point, the tide turned decisively. Timurtash's forces began to falter, and what started as a raid turned into a rout. The Bosnians pursued the retreating Ottomans, inflicting heavy casualties. Timurtash himself may have escaped, but his army was shattered. The victory was complete, and the Bosnians stood triumphant. The Battle of Bileća was not a large engagement by the standards of the time. It likely involved a few thousand fighters at most, far smaller than the massive clashes that would define the Ottoman wars in the decades to come. But its significance was immense. For the Bosnians, it was a rare and resounding victory against a seemingly unstoppable foe. It bolstered King Tvrtko's prestige and proved that the Ottomans could be beaten. For the Ottomans, it was a setback, though not a fatal one. Sultan Murad would soon turn his attention to Serbia, culminating in the fateful Battle of Kosovo in 1389, where both he and much of the Serbian nobility would perish. For Vlatko Vuković, the victory at Bileća cemented his reputation. He would go on to fight at Kosovo, leading Bosnian troops alongside Serbian forces in a desperate stand against the Ottomans. But while Kosovo ended in a bloody stalemate, Bileća was an unambiguous triumph. It showed the power of local resistance and the importance of terrain in medieval warfare. The battle also highlighted the fleeting unity of the Bosnian kingdom. In the years that followed, internal divisions and external pressures would weaken Bosnia, paving the way for its eventual conquest by the Ottomans in 1463. Why does the Battle of Bileća matter today? It's a reminder of a time when small, determined forces could challenge empires. It speaks to the resilience of the Bosnian people, who, despite their fractious politics, could unite against a common threat. It also underscores the complexity of the Balkans in the medieval era, a region where faith, loyalty, and power were constantly in flux. The victory at Bileća delayed the Ottoman advance, giving Bosnia a brief reprieve, but it was a reprieve, not a turning point. The Ottomans would return, and their conquest of the Balkans would reshape the region for centuries. The sources for this battle are limited. Bosnian chronicles, like those of the time, are scarce, and Ottoman records from this period focus more on their victories than their defeats. Much of what we know comes from later accounts pieced together by historians like John Fine and Marko Suica, who have studied the medieval Balkans. Their work helps us understand the broader context, the rise of Tvurtko's Bosnia, the early Ottoman raids, and the role of figures like Vlatko Vukovic. But the lack of detail about the battle itself is a challenge. We don't have vivid descriptions of the fighting or the exact numbers involved. Instead, we rely on educated guesses, grounded in what we know about warfare at the time. As we reflect on Bileća, it's worth considering the human cost. The soldiers who fought, Bosnian knights, Ottoman raiders, local militiamen, were not just names in a history book. They were men with families, fears and hopes, caught in a struggle larger than themselves. The hills around Bileća, now quiet, once rang with the clash of steel and the cries of the fallen. The victory belonged to the Bosnians, but it came at a price, as all victories do. In the end, the Battle of Bileća is a snapshot of a world on the brink. It captures a moment when the Kingdom of Bosnia, proud and defiant, stood its ground against an empire that would soon dominate the Balkans. It's a story of courage, strategy, and the power of place. And though the Ottoman tide would eventually overwhelm Bosnia, battles like Bileća remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, resistance can leave a lasting mark.